Thank you to Emirates Leisure Retail and Zoma for keeping us all caffeinated this morning and awake, which is fantastic. But also, of course, the panels have done that. So we're in the final straight before lunch now, but we've got a couple of sessions left for you. And for our next session, I'm delighted to welcome back somebody who's moderated panels at AviaDev before and is wise and knowledgeable beyond his years. That is Tatenda Karuwa. He's actively involved in supporting African airlines build their resilience. And this session's been designed to illustrate how airlines can continue to provide connectivity amid conflict and risk. So Tatenda, please join me on stage. You will be.
All right, thank you very much, John. Happy to be back on the AviaDev stage. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tatenda Karuwa. Some of you might have known me from my time at Simple Flying, but I've joined the aviation team at Solus Insurance Brokers. Here with my two colleagues, Timur and Maxim. So just a little bit about us. We are a Dubai-based reinsurance broker offering tailored solutions to clients with sophisticated needs, like airlines, of course. As of 2025, we serve over 55 clients with an asset value of over $5 billion. We work with airlines, airports, general aviation operators, ground handlers, and various other stakeholders. And as you can see, we have quite an extensive presence. However, this is not a sales pitch, so we can chat more about us separately. So on to our topic, complex flight plan, navigating connectivity amid conflict and risk. We'll basically explore the effects of conflicts on airline connectivity in Africa, as well as the role of insurance. And as John mentioned about resilience, I would just like to say, development is not always about expansion. It's also about being resilient and navigating challenges that, in the case of conflicts, none of us in the room can change. So, if you listen to, I'm sure a lot of us have seen the videos, recent videos from Khartoum International Airport. For those wondering if it's AI, it's not. These are the devastating impacts of the conflict in Sudan on aviation infrastructure. It's quite heartbreaking, and it's sad. And Daniel mentioned a bit about conflicts. As we can see here, they're not only unique to Africa. According to the Global Peace Index, there were 56 active conflicts as of June 2024 around the world. The global economic impact of violence was $19.1 trillion in 2023. The Middle East and North Africa was considered the least peaceful region, with 4 out of 10 of the least peaceful countries located in MENA. And Yemen and Sudan were considered the least peaceful countries in the region and in the world. So for the sake of this presentation, we'll zero in on Sudan because we have a lot of experience there. We've been the broker for one of the country's largest airlines for several years, including during the civil war. And just to give you a recap, in April 2023, a civil war broke out in the country, impacting several state infrastructure, including Khartoum International Airport, as you saw. So how does this affect aviation? We see aircraft hull losses, airspace closures, increased operating costs, lack of travel interest, reduced traffic and demand, maintenance and refueling challenges, and damage to airport infrastructure. So if you look at this map from 2023, due to the airspace closure in Sudan, and then another one in Niger later in the year, and restrictions of overflying Libya and several other parts of the continent, we can see the extensive area that airlines could not operate in the continent. This significantly impacted intra-Africa traffic, as well as intercontinental routes. So let us look at the state of connectivity in Sudan in 2022. We can see that flight activity was pretty much consistent throughout the year, average of about 1,800 scheduled flights to the country, with Khartoum having about 1,600. However, it's important to note that not all of these were actually operated. These are scheduled flights, and the data is within the limitations of the environment. I'm sure you understand that. So fast forward to 2023, March, the last full month before the conflict, there were over 1,700 scheduled passenger flights to Sudan, over 20 scheduled passenger airlines flying there, over 25 airline routes, including one to London Gatwick, and 6 Sudanese airports had scheduled passenger flights. And these were some of the reputable airlines flying to Sudan. A lot of them are in the room. And then full year 2023 tells the full picture. We can see that immediately after the conflict in April, flight activity dropped to virtually zero. However, Port Sudan picked up later in the year when the eastern part of the airspace was opened. So you might wonder where we come in. What implications does this have on insurance? We all pay insurance here. We see multiple hull war claims in the market, higher insurance premiums, higher risk perception, reduced capacity in the market, coverage restrictions and strict subjectivities, as well as here, sorry, I just wanted to tell you that, so hull war coverage is not only about, soldiers shooting at your aircraft. Claims can also be triggered by things like confiscation, nationalization, seizures, terrorism, and the like. So here we can see some of the hull war claims in the market between 2012 and 2025. Some that have resulted from conflicts include the 3 Yemeni aircraft that were destroyed recently in Yemen. In 2014 in Libya, the various aircraft that were damaged were destroyed in Tripoli. And also Malaysia Airlines MH17 that you might recall was shot down over Ukraine. So if we go back to that tragic day in Khartoum in April, these were some of the aircraft that were destroyed and the insured values. Airbus A330, 104 million. Boeing 737-800, 36.5 million. 737-300, 6.9 million. Ilyushin IL-76, $4 million, which is a lot of losses. And in total, we see total losses of over $300 million. This was one of the largest single losses in aviation war risk history in terms of the number of aircraft that were damaged, some of them mapped out over there. There was damage to nearly 50 aircraft, damage to some 70 airport structures, and Khartoum Airport was closed for 2 years after suffering extensive damage. And if you're wondering what that is, that's the passenger terminal. This is what it looked like before. So how does this affect airline insurance premiums? We see that underwriters charge higher premiums for hotspot flying. Hull war composite rates have increased by over 1,200% between April 2023 and May 2025 in Sudan. Composite rates have increased by 75% since May 2025 after the recent attacks in Port Sudan. And across Africa, we've seen that average lead rates have increased by 4.31% from 2023 to 2024 on the non-war policies. And average composite rates have increased by 10%. However, on the last 2 points, it's important to note that this is not only because of the conflict. There's several factors to consider, but this is just to give you a broad overview of how much rates have increased across the region. So now what can we do? To quote IATA, civil aviation serves a purpose that transcends politics. We must all continue to work together, even during times of conflict, to make sure that people remain on the move, humanitarian aid needs to continue moving, cargo needs to continue moving. But however, we see that high-risk areas, like Sudan, for example, Khartoum in particular, are automatically excluded from your insurance policies. However, these can be written back. Because someone yesterday challenged me and say, well, if there's a conflict, if there's a war, we'll just stop flying there. In many cases, international airlines can afford to do that, but the domestic carriers have a mandate to keep people moving, they need to keep cargo moving, and aviation is particularly vital to the survival of an ecosystem. So there are several things that in the case of domestic carriers they can do. Airlines can still obtain favorable and competitive rates. This can be achieved by sharing as much information with your underwriters as possible, conducting proper risk assessment and ensuring adequate risk management techniques. Risk management is very, very important. Outlining contingency plans, for example, alternative airports to land at in case anything goes down on the ground. And obviously relying on a specialized broker who knows the territory, because I'll be honest with you, many of the times the underwriters looking at the risks, they're sitting in the office in London. And full credit to them, they do an exceptional job. But they're probably reading articles that paint the picture to be worse than it actually is. So on the ground insights from the brokers and the clients are vital to keeping rates realistic and flights running. And we actually have tangible results. Let us look at Sudan in 2025. Khartoum Airport remains inaccessible, obviously. However, flights have safely operated to Port Sudan for about 2 years. And thanks to our support, domestic flights resumed in the country, which was a major breakthrough since the start of the war. This was supplying key domestic links for the people in Sudan. There were passenger flights from Port Sudan to Dongola and Kassala, for those who know the areas. However, it's unfortunate that recent drone attacks in Port Sudan have led to some flight suspensions, but we never give up. We continue to work with our clients and our partners to ensure that where we can, and when it is safe to do so, flights keep running because they're very important for the country and for everyone traveling in and around the continent. Now, I can tell you more about Libya, the DRC, give you other examples. We can even dive deeper into the granular data. However, this is all that I have time for. And if you want something more proactive, if you listen to the AviaDev podcast we did in February, we already shared some best practices and things you can do to get a favorable positioning when looking for your insurance. Seems like some firms here found it rather inspiring, so don't be surprised if you hear similar advice during the conference. But anyways, thank you very much for your attention. Once again, you can visit us at our stand, or alternatively, you can scan this QR code to visit our website. If you have any questions, feel free to talk to me or my colleagues. Asante sana. Yeah.
Asante Sana.